This encounter takes place several years ago in a remote part of the Australian outback. For a bit of background, I'm a pretty built 6'2" dude and was around 26 years old at the time. Now on to the story. I was on a road trip with a mate traveling around the central Queensland outback in my old, semi-reliable Nissan X-Trail. We're both science and zoology nerds and heard about this amazing dinosaur trail out this way, which is basically a grouping of 3 areas: Winton, Richmond, and Hughenden. These places have had previous dinosaur bone discoveries, fossils, as well as a seriously awesome dinosaur track with preserved footprints. We were staying at a place 3 hours from Winton for a couple of days, and we were pretty keen to check out this trail. So we made the decision to do the 6-hour round trip in a day. We were pretty ambitious and stupid back then. We left at 9 a.m. the next morning, car packed with lunch, several liters of water, and my trusty GPS, and off we went. It was a long drive, and halfway through, my aircon decided to cark it. If any of you have lived in or have visited Australia in the summer, you would know it's brutally hot. So I'm sure you can imagine the 3-hour trip without AC, with the eventuality of the 6-hour round trip, was hell. To make matters worse, my GPS also stopped working, as the map software did not recognize the area that we were in. Luckily, I had an old map in my back seat, but it was pretty tough to revert back to map reading when you're used to a computer screen telling you where to go, especially given we're talking the Australian outback here, complete with dirt tracks for roads and very limited signage. But I digress. Finally, we make it to the trail and kick around there for a couple of hours. Not gonna lie, it was pretty awesome. Then we decided to make the trip back, as it was starting to get later in the afternoon, and we didn't want to be driving back in the dark. As we were about to leave, this gnarly old guy who appeared to be an employee of the trail company, dressed in all khaki camouflage gear, asked us about where we were from and where we were heading. He gave me the stink eye when I was vague with the details, but my friend told him the name of the town where we were staying. He took a real liking to my friend, and he laughed when we told him about our lengthy journey in. Apparently, we had taken the long route, and there was a much quicker way to get back that would shave about an hour off the trip. We jumped at the directions, which we wrote down. Off we went on our merry way, thinking about how lucky we were to have met this old dude who gave us some sweet intel on a shortcut home. But I can't deny, there was definitely a creep vibe coming off him. Based on the directions he gave us, we went winding along several roads in the area I had never been on, and eventually settled straight on this narrow dirt road. We were supposed to reach an intersection after about half an hour, take a right, and continue on that road until we got to a main highway that would take us back. After an hour and a half of driving on this dirt trail, though we still hadn't reached this intersection, I was starting to get freaked out a bit, thinking we'd missed a turn, but my mate was completely chilled out and was sure we would get there eventually. I think he thought I was driving too slowly, but there are kangaroos out there. Man, those things can be seriously dangerous if you hit one. We had been traveling for a while now. It was getting later in the day, and I got to the point where the petrol in the tank was only a quarter full. There were no houses, other roads, or cars in sight, and I was really not comfortable with where this was heading. The middle of nowhere, in a remote area in the wasteland that is the Australian outback. There weren't even any trees, only this dirt road and desolate dry brushland shrubs as far as the eye can see. I stop the car and tell my mate to get the binoculars out of the back and take a look around in case he can see a landmark. Yes, I carried binoculars in my car. I still do. He obliges and can just make out this house-like structure not too far in the distance. So we made the decision to head for that. We figured it could be a house, and maybe the people would be nice enough to give us some petrol to top us up and some better directions out of there. We neared this structure, and it became apparent that it was not a house at all. We pulled up out front and see it's an old caravan that's been burnt to a shell from the inside out. It still had 3 blackened partial walls up though, so we can't see all the way in. And it looks like someone had been there recently because there are animal bones strung up all over the place, and a crow skull at the entrance to the caravan. Some of the animal bones even had grass or horsehair woven into them, and they were arranged like decorations. Then we see this hand-painted sign that's been staked into the ground with the words Moonlight Motel on it. My alarm bells were ringing loud and clear. I nudge my friend to say, "Let's get the fuck out of here." But he's distracted by something in the distance. It's a car coming in the direction that we had just come from. Would have been only 10 minutes behind us the entire time we were driving, but I didn't see it once. It's kicking up a ton of dust, which indicates that it's coming fast towards us. At this point, we both hear this creepy scratching sound coming from the burnt-out caravan, like someone is scratching at the wall from inside. I move a little closer to try and see what it is, and there was a person in there peeking out at us from a hole in the damaged wall. Then this childlike voice, that is obviously a grown man imitating a little girl, giggles and says,
"Are you here to play with me?"
My mate and I both look at each other and book it out of there, back to the X-Trail. Just as I'm about to reverse out, the other car stops just behind my car with the high beams on. I can't see the driver, but they're in my way, so I can't reverse out from where I'm stationed. I have no choice but to drive forward and turn around that way, narrowly missing the staked motel sign. As we were turning to leave, the driver starts blaring on the horn, just hammering on it for no reason at all. I just sped off, back in the direction we came from. The other car doesn't follow. It's getting to twilight at this stage, and pretty dangerous to be out on these country roads once it's dark because of the kangaroo situation. But we're feeling a bit better as we manage to navigate our way back to where we came from, the Dino Trail, and even start to joke around about what happened. The person in the other car was probably just honking at us to get our attention, to help us with directions, or something. I pulled into the parking lot and go to the front desk area of the company that runs the tours. I explained that we had gotten lost on our way back to the town we were staying at, and the lady there was kind enough to give us just enough petrol for the ride back. I couldn't help myself. I mentioned to her that her workmate was a real jerk for giving us those weird directions. We figured that there was no way we messed up the advice he had given us. She gives me a weird look and asked me to describe the guy. I do, and her face goes funny, and she says, "That man does not work here. I saw him today talking with the tourists, and my boss had to ask him to leave. He kept trying to get the details of where the people were staying, and telling them that he had vacancies at this place, and they could stay there, called the Moonlight Motel. So, creepy old dude pretending to give helpful directions to a couple of city folk to trap and potentially murder them in your lovely accommodation? Let's not meet." I grew up in Central Texas. This happened at a large lake in South Texas when I was around 20 years old. My family owns a small fishing cabin on this lake. The cabin was very secluded. Myself and a group of 5 other friends had taken to hanging out at the cabin pretty often. The entire lake was very large, 30 square miles, 20,000 surface acres, but our cabin was on the arm of the lake. The water was about 1,500 feet wide from one side to the other of this arm. We also had a pier that jutted out about 100 feet. One morning, I was up very early by myself. I noticed some movement on the other side of the lake. I had binoculars with me and gave it a look. It was a doe and her fawn foraging, but what was at their feet? They were standing in a patch of mushrooms. A friend had just given me a dose of magic mushrooms a couple of months prior for my birthday. It was an amazing experience. There were cattle that grazed across the lake, so I figured it was a possibility that these may be magic as well. For those of you who don't know, this particular fungi grows on cow poop. So, long story short, I paddled over in a kayak, picked a few of them, went back home, researched them, and when I was more than reasonably sure they were the type I wanted, or at least not poison, I tried them. I know, stupid. Yes, I thoroughly cut, cleaned, washed, and disinfected them first. They were the real deal. Soon enough, we were making regular trips to pick shrooms. Eventually, we had so many, we started selling them to others. Just friends, people that we trusted. Eventually, we were going out there every Friday night and picking, partying for the weekend, and heading home Sunday evening. We were making great money and having a lot of fun doing it. I'm not trying to glamorize such activity, and actually, such a lifestyle ended up having big consequences in the end, a story in itself. But we were young and dumb at the time. As time went by and nothing bad happened, we began to feel safer and safer and took less precautions. I should say that this was several years ago, and very few people had cell phones. Myself nor any of my friends owned one, and even if we had, most likely we would not have gotten reception out there in those days. A guy that we had been selling to wanted a large amount. We're talking a couple of pounds dried. So we got into the kayaks and paddled across one night and started hunting. A little dry, so not nearly as many as we sometimes found, in order to fill our request order. In order to fill our order request, we were going to have to venture into new territory. I'll explain. From our pier where we launched the kayaks from, to the left, our arm of the lake continued down another mile, where it eventually became more of a creek. To the right, it jutted out to a peninsula, about a half-mile long, and then circled back around into a cove where you could no longer see it, and then it opened up to the main lake. The beach was clear for about 200 feet, and then it was very thick woods. We cut across the peninsula to get to the beach that was hidden by it. In all the months we had been hunting, we never seen anyone on land, just the occasional fishing boat heading out or coming in. We had been looking on the hidden beach for about 40 minutes when my eye caught a reflection from my light in the woods to my left. "You see that?" I said to my friend. "Yeah, what is that?" We walked into the woods to find 2 beat up and severely dilapidated school buses. They looked as if they had been there since Jesus' day, and the woods had sorta just grown in around them. Someone had made a poor attempt to camouflage them with spray paint. I had caught sight of a piece of the reflective tape, surprisingly still a little reflective. My heart was racing, and I was on high alert, but I was also very curious. We walked over and started to peer in the windows. but we couldn't see much because of all the tree sap obscuring our view. About that time, my heart leapt out of my chest as I heard what sounded like a muffled chainsaw starting up near the second school bus. But soon enough, we figured out it was just a small diesel generator inside of a Rubbermaid container, buried in the ground, that had automatically kicked on. Still, that was enough to convince me that this place was occupied, or at least maintained. We composed ourselves, laughed a little, and decided to leave. We got back to the beach, cut across the small peninsula, and headed for the cluster of reeds where we had stashed our boats. "Hey man, where's our boat?" my friend asked. I became panic-stricken. He saw another patch of reeds down the beach and seemed relieved, thinking that maybe that was where we left our boats. But I have a famously impeccable sense of direction, and I knew this was the patch. He seemed to fully believe that we would find our boats at the next patch, and just to humor him, and just in case my spidey sense was off tonight, we headed for the next patch about 150 feet away. No boats. Now my friend was freaking as well. Then we heard a disembodied voice coming from the tree line. "I assume you motherfuckers are here to rob me." We look and see a guy in his mid-40s, 6 foot tall, 180 pounds, dressed in army fatigues, BDUs, holding a machete and a billy club. He was quickly and aggressively walking towards us. He shouted, "I got him over here, Ro." The second guy's name, or nickname, I assume. Soon enough, a second guy appeared. He was about 18 or 19, and about 6 foot tall, 180 pounds as well. He was also in fatigues. He too was holding a machete and had a shoulder holster meant for a large revolver, although there was no gun in it. "What the fuck are y'all up to? You stealing shit from us?" the younger guy questioned while snatching our bags of mushrooms off the ground where we had dropped them in fear. "No, we're looking for food," I replied. "Bullshit. Them are cow shit shrooms. We should call the sheriff, but we don't need no pigs rooting around here," the young one said. "We'll just deal with it on our own. I guess you realized your boats are out to sea by now." They both laughed. They pushed our boats into the lake, and the current had carried them away, so all you could see was a distant white dot. We were both terrified, and they knew it. For the first time, I could smell whiskey on both of their breaths. My friend was getting desperate. "Money. We can give you money. Just let us go and we'll bring you some cash as soon as we get rid of these," he proposed. They laughed again. The older one started talking. "We don't give a shit about money. We take fine care of ourselves. We really don't like you drawing attention to our humble home here," referring to the buses. I think they were squatters, maybe more. "Tell you what, if one of y'all can swim out there and get them boats and bring 'em back, then we'll let y'all be on your way, as long as y'all never come back. If you don't think you can do it, we'll have to decide where to go from there." I asked my friend what he wanted to do. We decided that I would swim for it and bring back both boats, or die trying. That meant my friend would be left alone with the two of them, and we weren't sure if they would hold up their end of the bargain. I started swimming for it. My arms and legs were on fire. My lungs were tensing to provide enough oxygen. Finally, I reached the boat. The paddle was lodged inside, thankfully. I paddled to the other boat and tied it off to tow it. About 10 minutes had passed, and I began to paddle back towards the beach, and I finally reached it. I did reluctantly. I thought they were going to scratch on their end. They told us if they ever caught us there again, it would not work out too well for us. But they let us get into our boats and paddle away. They threw rocks and taunted us while we were in range. I was half expecting them to wait until we get into deep enough water and start shooting with the missing revolver. Luckily, that never happened. We paddled further down, so they couldn't see what cabin we went to. Obviously, we never went back. So, creepy father-son squatter duo, I know this was our fault, and I take full responsibility, but y'all are still creepy as fuck. How about we never meet again? Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please share, like, and comment, and become part of the Unity by hitting the subscribe button. If you have a scary story that you would like to share, be sure to send it to my email or post it on the free horror stories subreddit. Consider donating to this channel and be sure to follow me on Twitter. And until next time, stay spooky and never forget, there's always a reason to be afraid.